morning, Peter Goertz. I'm a psychiatrist. If something sounds bizarre, does that automatically mean it's not true? I don't think so. Let's use our logic as best we can, even though logic itself can be fallible. Does receiving an organ transplant change personality? Interesting question, and I've always been fascinated by things that are not understood by conventional science. I have seen a fair amount of patients who've had transplants, like heart transplants, liver transplants, especially liver transplants. The hospital where I work does a good amount of transplants. And all this to me is food for thought. For instance, regarding the way we see medicine, the way we see science. And there's a lot that's not understood in medicine. And to me, that's great because that leaves room for creativity and learning. And again, I've always been fascinated by things that we don't understand. And potentially down the road, we will understand them, maybe not. That's another possibility, that our mind is just not capable of understanding certain things. But either way, in my opinion, we want to keep an open mind. And just because we don't understand something, don't understand the cause, mechanism, that does not mean something does not exist. So there are examples of people who've had transplants who've reported personality change. I think mainly at least heart transplants, but potentially also people have had, from what I understand, there have been reports by people of having personality changes after transplants of other organs. For example, one person who received a heart transplant all of a sudden started listening to classical music, really loving classical music. And then later on, the person found out the donor was a child on his way to I think a violin lesson, and died by from a gunshot wound with his violin case in his hand. Another example is a lady, I think middle-aged lady, who received a heart transplant from a young man, an 18-year-old man who died in a motorcycle accident. And when she was interviewed after her heart transplant, she was asked, I think, what she wanted to say. And the first thing I think she said was, "I really want a glass of beer." So that was very uncharacteristic for her. And she also, one of the first things she did as soon as she had the possibility or option of doing that, was to go to Kentucky Fried Chicken and buy chicken nuggets. And later she found out that her donor, the 18-year-old man, was very fond of beer and chicken nuggets and also green peppers, which the recipient, the lady, started to really enjoy eating. Another person reportedly started smoking cigars or being at least interested in smoking cigars. Another person who had not been interested in sports became interested in sports. People have noted that their sexual preference even changed. So as far as I remember, a young man received a heart from a young lesbian female. A young heterosexual man received a heart transplant from a lesbian female, and then started becoming a much better lover. His girlfriend apparently confirmed that, and the recipient felt like he understood women's bodies a lot better. And there was another example of, I think, a lesbian female receiving a heart of a heterosexual female, and then she ended up marrying a man. So very interesting stories. They may not be true. I can't confirm them. But again, to me, it's interesting and we want to keep an open mind. People may develop after receiving a heart transplant different personality traits in general, like more confidence. And another fascinating and sad situation was the recipient of a heart in a dream found out the name. Well, I don't know if that was a sad situation, but in a dream, the name of the donor actually came to the recipient, and I think the recipient may have been able to contact the donor's family. And recipients have experienced reportedly memories that are not necessarily theirs. The memories are of the donor's life. For example, and this is the sad story I was thinking of, a recipient of a heart started having nightmares, and this apparently was of the donor being murdered, and that's how the recipient got the heart. And the recipient was able to remember enough details of the perpetrator from her dream that the perpetrator actually was arrested based on the recipient's information from the dream. So it's hard to argue, I think, with practical aspects like that. So again, I can't prove these things, I can't disprove them, but interesting stories. And another example was a middle-aged man received a heart from a younger man who had died, and then at some point met that younger man's wife, and there apparently was mutual attraction, and he married that man's wife. Unfortunately, there is a sad end to that story because the recipient, actually committed suicide then by gunshot wound, as had the donor, apparently. So very sad situation. So it makes you wonder about, again, some type of information being transmitted to the recipient with the transplanted heart. So some kind of information, meaning memories, character traits. And in a scientific approach, the cause and mechanism of what I'm talking about has not been clearly elucidated, and cause is also not the same as mechanism, but neither one, from what I understand, has been clearly elucidated. But again, that doesn't mean these things cannot happen. And if we think about it, the heart has nerves, and one could even maybe say the heart has its own nervous system. And that may create electromagnetic energy, or as far as I know it does. And if you have a new heart, you may have a new electromagnetic energy emanating from the new heart, and potentially that new electromagnetic energy may come with new memories. Thank you.